The chamber was silent, save for the faint hum of energy coursing through the walls. Alien cadets shifted uneasily, each holding tools and gadgets meant to summon fire. And then, the human moved, calm, deliberate, and almost invisible among the chaos. Two rough stones met with a quiet clack, and for a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a spark blossomed into flame, warm, steady, unstoppable. No one spoke. The fire wavered and danced, casting flickering shadows across the domed ceiling of the academy. Alien eyes widened, some in disbelief, others in fear, as if the very act of producing fire without complex machinery was a kind of magic they had never encountered. The human knelt beside the flame, adjusting it with an instinctive ease, as though tending fire was less a skill and more a dialogue, a conversation between hand, stone, and air. Around the chamber, creatures from dozens of worlds murmured. Tentacles twitched nervously. Eyes glowed with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Some aliens whispered of instinct, others of recklessness. Here was a species they had dismissed as fragile, untested, and inconsequential, and yet, in the span of a few heartbeats, that illusion had been shattered. The instructors, beings as ancient as the stars themselves, paused mid-sentence. Their probes, their scanners, their holographic readouts, all useless against this quiet, human defiance of expectation. The human stood, a small figure among towering aliens, yet radiating a confidence that required no announcement. No words. No threat. Just the subtle power of doing what others deemed impossible with nothing more than a pair of stones. The class shifted their attention. Some reached for their devices, eager to replicate the human's action. Sparks flew, gadgets whirred, and energy arcs leapt from their hands, but the fire was stubborn, refusing to obey formulas and equations. One by one, alien cadets realized the truth. Fire was not a puzzle for the human, but a partner, a tool shaped by thought and touch rather than by logic alone. In that moment, awe settled over the chamber. Fear followed quietly behind it, like a shadow slipping over the light. They had underestimated humans for so long, assuming fragility meant weakness. Yet here was evidence that humans operated on a plane entirely their own, where survival, ingenuity, and calm patience combined into a force the galaxy could not easily categorize. The human's eyes scanned the room, a slight, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corners of their lips. Not arrogance, something older, deeper. Recognition. Understanding. The knowledge that the world around them, vast and alien, would never predict the choices humanity would make, even in the simplest acts. The flame sputtered, caught the draft of a ventilation vent, and roared higher. Shadows danced across the stunned faces of cadets, revealing a truth they had yet to admit. The universe was watching, and humans were never simple to understand. Outside the chamber, distant stars blinked indifferently, but inside, the fire held the attention of every being present. Whispered discussions started, debates flared. How could a species without advanced pyrotechnics, without energy manipulators, simply create fire from nothing? Some speculated on genetic mutation, others on hidden technology. The instructors, though inscrutable, exchanged glances that spoke volumes. A human, untested, unarmed, had demonstrated mastery that defied alien comprehension. And as the human crouched again, tending the small blaze, something shifted. The room's energy changed from curiosity into a quiet tension, a realization that the games, the lessons, and the Academy's carefully controlled exercises had just met a variable it could not measure. The human had arrived, and in that arrival, the predictable patterns of alien expectation had been broken. The fire crackled, steady and unwavering, casting a warm glow over the chamber. Alien cadets stared, some envious, others afraid, as the human's calm hands guided the flames. In that quiet dominance, they glimpsed the first truth of the species they thought they understood. Humans did not follow rules. Humans defined them. And the lesson had only just begun. The flame flickered, alive in the human's hands, refusing to be tamed. Alien cadets leaned closer, hesitant, their instincts telling them to step back. Every eye in the chamber held a mixture of fascination and dread, for the fire did not simply burn, it demanded attention. The human crouched beside the fire, their fingers hovering above the amber light as though they could shape it with thought alone. Around them, the cadets were restless. One reached for a flame manipulator, sparks arcing erratically in nervous imitation. Another murmured calculations under their breath, trying to understand what physics the human had ignored or rewritten. But the flame remained loyal only to its creator, dancing on the subtle rhythm of the human's breath. In that small, controlled blaze, there was a quiet defiance. It was not just fire, it was a statement. The human did not ask for permission, did not rely on machines or complex formulas. They relied on presence, patience, and an almost instinctual dialogue with the raw energy of the world. It was as if the very laws of the chamber bent momentarily to witness an anomaly, a species that laughed at expectation and redefined capability. One alien leaned forward too eagerly, and the human's glance stopped them mid-step, calm, unyielding. There was authority in the human simplicity, a quiet power that required no amplification, no aggression. The cadets began to whisper among themselves, voices tinged with disbelief and a growing respect. They had come to this class expecting to demonstrate superiority, to measure humans against their advanced technology. Instead, they were witnessing something unquantifiable, something that could not be reduced to charts, equations, or probability algorithms. The humans stood slowly, the fire now perched between their palms like a living entity, and moved to the center of the chamber. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, and for a moment, the academy itself seemed to pause. This was more than a lesson in pyrotechnics, it was a confrontation of assumptions. The cadets had assumed fragility equaled weakness. They had assumed predictability equaled control. And now, in the presence of the human, all certainties flickered like the flame in their hands. One of the older cadets, tentacles quivering, ventured a question, voice trembling, How do you do that?" The human's answer was a soft smile and a shrug, almost casual. "I don't do it. I listen." The words echoed strangely in the vast chamber, and even the instructors paused, considering the weight behind them. To listen, to truly perceive, was a skill many species did not value. But humans, they had honed intuition into a force that could bend perception itself. The fire jumped higher as if reacting to the unspoken tension. Heat brushed against faces, and the faint smell of smoke filled the air, grounding the moment in tangible reality. Alien cadets were forced to reconcile theory with observation. Calculations failed. Protocols faltered. And the human remained serene, the calm eye at the center of a storm they had not even begun to understand. The emotional peak came suddenly. One cadet, attempting to mimic the human's technique, triggered an energy flare that scorched the chamber wall. Panic rippled through the room. Instruments beeped warnings, and some species recoiled instinctively. But the human moved without haste, hands steady, guiding the rogue flame back into harmony. The cadets watched in awe, some pale, some wide-eyed, as the human handled chaos not with brute force but with a quiet precision that defied logic. In the aftermath, the human knelt again, tending the fire with careful, deliberate motions. It was no longer just a flame, it had become a symbol. Every cadet in the room felt it, the weight of possibility, the reminder that humans did not merely survive, they transcended expectation. The fire that defied instruction now served as a mirror, reflecting what it meant to be human, resourceful, fearless, and profoundly alive. The chamber quieted, the fire glowing steadily, a heartbeat in the center of the room. Cadets and instructors alike held their breath, acknowledging that something fundamental had shifted. Humans were no longer merely participants in these lessons. They were catalysts, altering the very rules around them. And as the human glanced toward the door, a faint glimmer of curiosity in their eyes, it was clear that the next challenge, whatever it might be, would never see them coming. The chamber fell silent as the instructor's gaze fell upon the human. Judgment hung heavy in the air, palpable like the pressure before a storm. Every cadet held their breath, anticipating a failure, yet sensing that the rules they understood might bend around the human's presence. The human stood at the center of the arena, fire now a calm, flickering companion at their side. The room, built for observation and assessment, seemed suddenly smaller, constricted by the intensity of expectations. Alien cadets shifted uncomfortably, their senses attuned to every heartbeat, every subtle movement. Judgment was no longer theoretical, it was a living force, pressing against them like gravity. Instructors, beings of precision and logic, began their evaluation with meticulous notes and quiet murmurs. They had seen countless species attempt to master elemental control, and most failed spectacularly under scrutiny. But the human, this anomaly, radiated a confidence that was neither arrogance nor ignorance. It was calm, deliberate, and utterly unshakable. One instructor, tall and angular, extended a sensor limb toward the flame, probing its intensity and stability. A tiny hiss escaped as the energy reacted, yet the human's hand hovered near, a silent command that steadied it. Murmurs of disbelief ran through the cadets. No other species could maintain equilibrium under such scrutiny, their flaws always exposed under the microscope of alien evaluation. The human's eyes, however, were focused not on the flames, nor the instructors, but on the challenge itself. There was a quiet understanding that true mastery was not about impressing others, but about remaining steadfast in the face of observation, skepticism, and even fear. As the aliens watched, the human lifted a small spark from the fire and transferred it carefully to a collection of fragile materials, igniting them in a pattern that mirrored constellations. The room went still. The act was deceptively simple, yet impossibly precise, demanding a harmony between patience, understanding, and instinct that no alien cadet had ever demonstrated. A sudden ripple of tension cut through the air. One cadet, emboldened, attempted to replicate the human's technique, yet their spark faltered, sputtered, and collapsed. Panic flashed in their eyes as the instructor's sensors flared red. But the human remained serene, kneeling briefly to guide the failing attempt with only a gesture, gentle, almost invisible, and the spark steadied once more. The cadet stared, awestruck, as the lesson unfolded. Mastery was not brute strength, not raw calculation, but a communion with the unknown, a dialogue between will and nature. The emotional peak arrived when the chief instructor, a figure known for impartiality and unyielding judgment, approached. Their gaze pierced, attempting to discern weakness, miscalculation, or pride. The human met it without flinch, offering neither challenge nor apology, only the quiet presence of someone who understood that fear had no dominion over skill. A whisper ran through the cadets. This was not just a test of ability, but a test of resilience, courage, and character, the qualities that defined humanity across the galaxy. Flames danced higher, shadows stretching and twisting against the walls. Alien cadets felt their assumptions crack like brittle ice underfoot. Every calculated expectation, every rigid theory of control and weakness, shattered in the presence of a species that refused to conform to prediction. And yet, the human did not revel in defiance. There was humility in their act, a deep recognition that power untempered by awareness was meaningless. The fire was a tool, a companion, and a mirror, reflecting not just skill, but the essence of a being who could face scrutiny, chaos, and doubt with grace. As the chief instructor withdrew, a silent acknowledgement passed through the room. Judgment had been made, and it could not undo the impression left behind. The human lowered the flame carefully, letting it rest, and turned toward the waiting cadets with a subtle, unspoken invitation. They had survived the heat of scrutiny, and now the path ahead would test them in ways even the instructors could not predict. Curiosity, fear, and awe lingered in the air as the human stepped forward, ready to confront challenges that demanded not just skill, but the heart that made them human. The arena's heat seemed to deepen, not from the flames themselves, but from the intensity radiating from the human at its center. Every gaze, alien, mechanical, and human alike, converged on that singular presence. In that moment, fire was no longer just an element. It had become a mirror, reflecting courage, resolve, and the indefinable spark that made a being truly alive. The human's hands hovered above the small blaze, not touching it, yet somehow commanding it. The fire flickered in response, an obedient yet wild companion. Alien cadets watched in quiet astonishment. None had ever seen mastery like this, not of raw power, nor of technical skill, but of an unshakable composure, a calm that could bend circumstances without force. Around them, the training arena seemed to pulse with anticipation. The walls, lined with sensors and observation ports, captured every nuance. The subtle tilt of the human's head, the slow exhale that carried confidence, the faint smile that acknowledged risk without fear. Fire, an element that could easily turn destructive, became a tool of artistry, a test of inner discipline rather than brute force. The instructor's scrutiny intensified. They had been certain that challenge was meant to reveal flaws, to show weakness, yet the human's every movement suggested intentionality, a deep understanding of balance between control and freedom. A cadet attempted to intervene, worried that the fire might escalate beyond safety protocols. The human's glance, steady and disarming, communicated silently, trust, but respect the challenge. The cadet hesitated, unsure whether to marvel or retreat. As the exercise progressed, the human manipulated the flame in ways that defied expectation. Sparks leapt from one ember to another, forming arcs and patterns that resembled constellations alien to human eyes, yet somehow familiar in their symmetry. The alien students felt an unease they couldn't articulate, a creeping realization that humans, though small and seemingly fragile, carried a spirit that refused to be constrained. Every flicker of the fire seemed to whisper a question: who truly commands, and who merely assumes control? Tension escalated as a sudden gust, artificially generated by the arena's environmental system, threatened to scatter the flames. Most would have faltered, their concentration shattered, but the human adapted instantly, their movements fluid, almost musical. They cupped the fire gently, guiding it back into harmony. It was a moment of revelation, a demonstration that courage was not the absence of danger, but the ability to face it without surrender. The emotional peak arrived when the chief instructor approached the boundary of the fire zone. Their sensors, designed to detect subtle weaknesses, flared erratically. This human, alone, unarmed, unarmored, exuded a force that metrics could not quantify. For a fleeting instant, even the instructors hesitated, unsure how to categorize a being who seemed to defy every established law of expectation. The human's gaze met theirs, steady, unwavering, and in that instant, judgment shifted from evaluation to acknowledgement. Here stood a creature whose fire was not only in their hands, but within their heart. Yet it was not hubris that defined this moment. In the silent aftermath, as flames danced softly and shadows stretched across the walls, there was a quiet introspection. The human bent slightly, extinguishing the fire with gentle breaths, leaving only the warm glow of embers. The lesson was clear: mastery is fleeting without heart, power is meaningless without empathy, and courage is measured not by spectacle, but by the choices made in the face of scrutiny and doubt. The room exhaled collectively. Alien cadets, once certain of human inferiority, now glanced at one another with tentative awe. The fire had been more than a test of skill, it was a revelation of essence, a glimpse into the unyielding spirit that defined humanity. As the humans stepped back, embers fading in the soft glow, the next challenge awaited. One that would not be fought with sparks or flames, but with determination, heart, and the quiet, relentless force that made humans remarkable. The arena was silent, yet the air thrummed with expectation. Every observer, human and alien alike, sensed that something had shifted, that what began as a simple demonstration of fire had become a testament to what humanity could carry in its heart. In that quiet, even the embers seemed to hold their breath. The human stepped forward, the glow of residual flames reflecting softly on their determined face. There was no rush, no grandiose gesture, only a deliberate calm that drew attention more powerfully than any spectacle could. Every movement was measured, almost meditative, as though the act of walking carried the weight of countless ancestors who had faced impossible odds with nothing but resilience and wit. Around them, the alien cadets and instructors exchanged uneasy glances. They had witnessed the fire tests, the displays of skill and courage, yet none had prepared them for this. It was not merely about mastery over elements or survival, it was about the enduring spark within a species, a fire that could not be extinguished, that could shape destiny even when the odds were insurmountable. The human reached the center of the arena and paused, closing their eyes briefly. Memories of struggle, of doubt, and of countless lessons flashed. Each failure, each scar, each small victory had led to this moment. The fire that once flickered between their fingers had now become symbolic, a beacon that connected past and future, teaching that courage was not born from strength alone, but from the relentless choice to act when others would hesitate. The alien observers leaned in, their instruments recording every micro-expression, every subtle shift in posture. They had come to judge, to measure, to classify. Yet as the human began to speak, softly, their words carried weight beyond expectation. Each sentence resonated not with force, but with clarity. The simplicity of human determination, the profound depth of commitment, and the quiet insistence that life itself is a fire that demands respect and purpose. Suddenly, a spark from the remaining embers danced upward, forming a fleeting luminous arc that mirrored the trajectory of the human's hand. Gasps echoed softly. No one had predicted such elegance, such unspoken poetry in a simple act. It was the culmination of years of learning, the merging of instinct and intellect, risk and reflection. And in that single luminous arc, the human conveyed what no report, no calculation, no alien manual could. That legacy is built not by fear, but by the courage to illuminate the unknown. The emotional apex arrived when the chief instructor stepped forward, placing a hand over their chest. Their sensors, once focused on cataloging performance, now registered something far subtler, a resonance of spirit. The human had transcended the task, elevating it from mere demonstration into an emblem of hope and ingenuity. The cadets, witnessing this, felt an unfamiliar warmth, awe, respect, and a quiet, contemplative humility. Even the environment seemed to respond. The temperature, the lighting, the very hum of machinery in the arena softened, as though the cosmos itself acknowledged the human presence. It was not a claim of dominance, but a quiet assertion of value, that every being, no matter how small, carries within it the capacity to ignite change, to inspire, to endure. As the human finally bent down, extinguishing the final ember with a gentle hand, a new understanding settled over the crowd. The fire had been a test, a spectacle, and a teacher all at once. It was a reminder that true strength lies not in intimidation or brute force, but in perseverance, ingenuity, and the quiet confidence to stand resolute when the universe expects hesitation. The arena exhaled, alive with unspoken acknowledgement. Alien cadets no longer saw a fragile species. They glimpsed the essence of humanity, an indomitable spirit, unyielding curiosity, and a capacity for greatness that could inspire across worlds. As the human stepped away from the center, embers fading into gentle warmth, one truth lingered: fire could be lit, but the legacy it inspired would burn far longer, carried silently in the hearts of those who dared to witness it.